gorgeous. Hi, dog. How you doing, sweetheart?
You get on, I got this.
A large crowd gathered in Washington Square Park, armed with latex gloves and a giant barrel of fake elephant dung. Marie Runyon had a handful of the fake dung and a few harsh words for the mayor's policies.
His handling of homeless and other vulnerable people is beyond the pale, does not belong in this civilized country. He has no heart, only a head and a big head. Everybody sing, big car fell through jar and be gay-o. Son of a gun, we'll have big fun on the bayou. Well, a goodbye, Joe, me gotta go, me oh my oh. Me gotta go pull the pirogue down the bayou. I decided that I would try to answer a question that is often posed to me. Who the hell are you, and how did you get to be what you are, and why do you do what you do, and what is this? I mean, why don't you just sometimes sit down and shut up and quit fighting and carrying on? The hills of North Carolina are where I was born and grew up. Love those hills, those mountains, and still do. Don't see them anymore, but this is my dad, a pharmacist, a very friendly, outgoing guy, whom all of my kid friends liked a lot and got along well with him. And this is my mother, who was a college graduate, which I understood was rare in those times. And she was also the first woman in our town to vote in 1920, when it became legal for women to vote in this country. One of my earliest real recollections is this. I was in a car with my dad.
She said there was a fellow hitchhiking, a black fellow, and her father was going to give him a ride, but he had to ride outside on the running board. I said, what was that all about? She said, her father said, I'll give him a ride, but he ain't sitting next to you. So from when she was 8, she saw the difference.
It was my beginning to understand something about, I didn't know the word then, but I know it now well, about racism in our country. I didn't know what a depression was, but I understood that it meant that nobody had any money. My dad learned I could go to Berea Academy. I could go there for almost nothing. I was enrolled there in the academy, and my sister was enrolled in the college, and we both stayed there and got our education. And then I began to wonder, but how come Berea is only white? And I asked a few questions, and it was easy to get answers. Berea wasted no time in teaching us something about the history of that school. The Kentucky laws had changed so that it was illegal for blacks and whites to be educated together.
Marie was not so much a black sheep of the family, not in my estimation, but she was the one who moved away to New York City, which is quite a queer place, as country people would say.
After Weezy was born, I noticed a change in my husband. He couldn't seem to stand not having my undivided attention. I was divorced when Weezy, Louise, my daughter, was 2. In due course, I had to move out of the, I don't know, I lost the apartment. What the hell was I going to do? I didn't know I was desperate. But it was 1955, and there was some housing available, and I did have a job with the ACLU. I began looking at the ads, and I found an apartment at 130 Morningside Drive.
Marie has an apartment, and she has for many, many, many years, probably has been there for 50 or 60 years, in a building owned by Columbia University. And at some point about 50 years ago, Columbia decided that they wanted to tear down that building and build a pharmaceutical college.
It demolished a number of buildings in the neighborhood, and it had decided it was going to demolish roughly half a city block that included 130 Morningside Drive, where Marie lived. It managed to demolish several of the buildings adjacent to it that it owned, but Marie and several other tenants in the building managed to block the demolition.
No, hell no, I'm not going to let them not let that big, important, famous institution take my daughter's home away from her. I'm not going to do it.
There were a lot of tactics that were used, a lot of underhanded tactics to try to empty out this building.
They put 4x8 plywood on the front windows of this building and put X's on it so that it looked like an abandoned building. At that point, the junkies saw an abandoned building, so they came in and ripped out the plumbing, and they ripped out the copper wire, whatever it was that they wanted.
But to live in a building of 24 apartments, of which only 5 were occupied, it's a little eerie. We had periods when we were afraid. It was difficult for our kids being in an empty building. It was difficult for us not knowing who might accost them when they came home from school.
For many, many years, it was really kind of weird to go into that building when there were so few occupied apartments, and there were tin sheets over the windows, and the doors were boarded up.
Practically every large newspaper in New York had a special file from Morningside Drive, because she was able to get reporters to come and see what was happening and to report on the latest demonstration. I don't remember all the protests we had, but I do remember that there were many of them, and they were very creative, and that many of them were invented by Marie.
She got rocking chairs, put it in front of the building when the wrecking crew was about to come up that morning, and she had these elderly people rocking in the chairs in front of the building so the wrecking crew could not get in.
The image on the flyer was a woman sitting in a rocking chair with a shotgun. Of course, we didn't have any shotguns, but we did have rocking chairs.
We had a very bright group of students and a good group of tenants, and we fought them through the courts to a standstill.
Well, welcome to Columbia University. It hasn't always looked like this. Beautiful sky, peaceful students, no nonsense of any kind going on, nonsense according to their description. There was a student rebellion here, 66 and 67. It finally erupted. I was with the students who were revolting against the university. I marched with them, singing and carrying on and telling the world how difficult Columbia University was.
Along the staircase, there was a solid line of police. The people in front of me were dragged down, and as they were dragged down, each individual cop standing on this line put his licks in. and they were laughing. I'll never forget it.
I have a history with Columbia since 1950, so I guess that's 50, 60 years, something like that. Seldom has it been peaceful like today. I've spent a lot of years with Columbia as my landlord. Long, long story.
I remember the president of Columbia University used to refer to her as, she's a wonderful woman, I wish she would get out of my life.
I never gave up with Columbia. I did not think from time to time they're going to win. I worried, of course, but, and sometimes other people would say, Marie, you might as well, what the hell, well, you might as well just move out of here. This is too much for you to do. And I said, just a damn minute. This is my home, which I got under great difficulty. And the only way they could get me out and the rest of us out is to do it legally, and not just to put a huge sign in the lobby of 7 buildings saying, get out, this building is coming down. I hate that kind of action on somebody just because they're big and important. They could just think they could just tell you what to do. I resent that kind of action on Columbia or anybody else. You got to think about other people. You also got to think about the law.
At the time when I first became responsible for managing the Columbia off-campus real estate, there was a lot of conflict and dissension in the neighborhood. And Marie was probably the most famous of those, housing activists. She was a tenant of mine, and I think when I first met her, she had a complaint about heat. And she lived in a building that had been gutted, except for like 5 or 6 apartments. And those apartments were scattered throughout the building. And she was in one of these. And all of the halls were empty. And the services were not really what they would be in a normal building. And she asked me, as she would typically do, she called me up and asked me would I come look at this. So I said, sure. We talked for a while, and she broke out a bottle of gin, and we sat there for a few hours, and that was my first encounter with her.
My button collection reflects my activism for the last 50 years. It started on this date right here when I was with the National Committee for Sane Nuclear Policy. And we were on a march to the UN with Dr. Spock and Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. You had to have a good address, and you had to have a good host or hostess. And if you had those 2 things, and I could get the people there, and they had Ossie there, we raised money. We raised a lot, and a lot of hell. I don't mind raising hell. I'm not afraid to raise hell. I would greet people and introduce them to the hostess if it were possible. And sometimes there'd be so many in a room, you just couldn't get all those introductions done. But Ossie, of course, got started, and I mean, he was an absolute genius at getting people to part with their money. But it was wonderful. I think it was $34,000 we raised for the Black Panthers Legal Defense Fund. Ossie was the best. Oh, Ossie was the best.
I had been working for the Peace Corps, and I came here to work with friends of mine who were very much involved in the Catholic left resistance to the war in Vietnam. And friends were on trial. It was called the Harrisburg trial, or the trial of the Harrisburg 8. And the charge was conspiracy to blow up the heating tunnels in Washington and to kidnap Henry Kissinger. You have to trust me on this. in a million years. This was never, you know, a plan or a plot. But again, we were dealing in rather hysterical times. So we needed to raise money. We were a bunch of teachers and, you know, ex-Peace Corps workers and, you know, regular folk. So somebody suggested Marie Runyon. She had several, you know, left causes. We sat down with this professional fundraiser, and the decision was made that I would be apprenticed to Marie. So the big direct mail piece that we did that brought in, gosh, I think it brought in about $100,000, which was major money. This was 1971. One of the high points was a party. I'm reasonably sure that she had sponsored the Black Panther event at Leonard and Felicia Bernstein's apartment. And so she just redid that for us. I remember when the party was over and a Jesuit friend of ours, Joe O'Rourke, who did a lot of the pitches at these events we would run, Marie stayed at the end, and we all sat around with Leonard Bernstein and Felicia in their Fifth Avenue apartment after the guests had gone, talking politics. It was pretty heady stuff for a 25-year-old, I have to say. I mean, it rolled off Marie's back. She, you know, it was all about the issues and justice, and the celebrities were simply a means to do good.
Teenagers weren't supposed to wear lipstick. I was always bitching about that. I want to wear some lipstick. And my mother said no. And I went away to college. I realized that I could wear lipstick and nobody was going to fuss at me. And I did. And I've been at it ever since. Oh, hell. I never done that before in my entire life. About a dozen people who were backing me up, mostly black and some white. They helped me to get much more involved with housing in Harlem. One of the leaders in the group said, "Okay, Marie, you're going to run for the state assembly." And I said, "Well, just shut your mouth. You know perfectly well I'm not about to do that. That would be a very racist thing for me to do, and I ain't gonna try to put no black official out of his business, unless, of course, he was a son of a bitch." And he said, "Yeah, but this guy is." So they kept going on and on and on, all of them saying, "Marie, you gotta do it, because we've got to have somebody in the assembly who's going to speak for us." So very reluctantly, I finally said, "All right already." So I ran against him, and believe it or not, I won. And I was shocked. I had no idea that, that this would happen.
She became a state assemblywoman. That unfortunately didn't last long. They really found out very quickly who she was and organized mightily to run somebody against her who would win. But when she was there, it really shook them up. I was so proud of her. I was always so proud of her.
One thing I know about Marie is that when she was in the state legislature, if an issue came up and the idea was generated by a Republican, she would support it. That always got her in trouble with the party, because there's so much trading back and forth that you don't give on this score because you're going to need it for that. And she'd say, "It's a good idea, and I'm going to vote for it, and you can't stop me." And that's kind of how she is. She will accept ideas from wherever they come, and she'll fight for them. But it does get her in trouble, because it means that she's a maverick, and especially if you're new to a governing body, they want to have all their little troops lined up. And Marie that's not her style. No, I think that's what's kept her going.
I was on the housing committee, and that was appropriate because I'd had so much housing experience, and people knew that, so I was so appointed. And we had the first housing committee meeting. Here was this bill to vote on. So when the vote came out, I voted yes. The bill passed, and passed the committee, and therefore had to go to the assembly. When the that meeting was over, the chair, whose name I've now forgotten, of course, called me, Marie, come up and let me talk to you. Trying to get people out of the room, and he said, you know, that's a Republican bill that you just voted for. And I said, oh, well, it's a good bill, I thought. And he said, but we don't do that, Marie. We're Democrats and we vote only for Democratic bills. And I said, well, wait a minute, now, I can't, that ain't the way I work. And he said, the governor will be furious. The governor promised that this bill would never get out of committee because now it has to go to the full assembly. And I said, well, tell him I'm sorry.
Her re-election campaign in 1976 was so frustrating, and that she lost by 150 votes in the primary was heartbreaking, but the Democratic Party bigwigs were determined to get her out. She was definitely a pain in their.
The black bag, you know, one that says Mother Jones, pray for the dead, fight like hell for the living. That's my bag.
I had started a Harlem Restoration Project after I was defeated for re-election to this New York State Assembly, and I did it without any financial backing. It was extremely difficult. Little by little, we made it.
The purpose of Harlem Restoration was to provide better housing and better living conditions for those people who didn't dream that they could ever get there. And Marie showed them the way. I mean, she took on this enormous, enormous task. People have said she's crazy, she's going to kill herself. She worked so hard. Marie hired ex-offenders to rehabilitate buildings. In the process of doing this, she taught them worthwhile lifetime skills. Very, very, very important, because it's not as though once the project was over, Marie, where do we go from here? What do we do? No, no, they were equipped for life to offer themselves as handymen, craftsmen, carpenters.
On May 4th, 1998, I was sitting at my desk in Harlem Restoration when somebody handed me, not the person who signed it, but somebody handed me a letter which I looked at, and it said, your employment is terminated. And this woman who fired me, I thought, God, this was my friend, and I helped her in organizing her building.
I would like to think that when organizations take on a life of their own, that they are self-perpetuating, that they are self-igniting. This was not the case. I mean, she was always struggling to keep the thing alive. Very important. You know, she had very little peace from, oh, she got awards and she was at banquets and so on and so forth. But what her internal peace of mind was, I have no idea. And I knew her up close and personal.
God, I've damn near killed myself since 1977 when I started this organization, and went through all kinds of difficulties. And at that time, we either owned or helped tenants to own 18 buildings. And none of that was easy because all of those buildings needed fiscal help.
Harlem Restoration gave leadership to the whole city for many, many years. And I was not surprised when she was deposed, because she was too effective. It was very important for them to bring in people that would eventually overturn her. They considered her, and I'm sure Columbia was behind it, they considered her a threat to their plans for expansion and for gentrification. It was so successful, it was so dynamic, it put so many people to work.
I really felt terrible when HRP came to an end because of the injustice that was displayed toward Marie. Their lousy, rotten, bitchy, childish behavior. I mean, mean, gutter sniping.
I was not happy. But I've gotten over it. You can't live with these things and weep and mourn and carry on, and so I can talk about them now, both of these, without being upset. Wish they had not happened that way, but didn't let them get me down. I've continued to be active since my firing.
All I know is that Marie has been a long time volunteer for the neighborhood. She helped me in the early 70s, taught me a lot. She was talking about civil rights before black people realized when we were still Negroes.
The older you get, the more you value connection with people. And it's not just social connection, but it's political connection. And that creates a whole nother, like it's a blossoming of a human relations. One person said, you meet it's important to stay active because you meet the most interesting people. And yet you don't remain active unless you can maintain the connection to people. So Marie gets a fulfillment of her whole experience as a human being. I mean, I think she's lasted because she has a clear idea of who she is. She has a clear idea of what justice is. But the idea of yourself isn't enough. You have to grow with movements and other people. And Marie is active because Marie has remained in touch with the critical movements. Marie is a woman who can't be intimidated.
We talk about everything. We talk about stuff like that, stuff that other people don't dare bring up. We can talk about it. And even slavery times and our differences, because we can't hide the fact that I'm black and Marie is Southern white.
I'm glad to welcome you all to a really astonishing event. I don't know if it's more astonishing that Columbia wanted to do this or that Marie wanted to let us do it.
Now, first I'd like to address your attention to the plaque on the right, which is dedicating this building, it was approved by the trustees, believe it or not, as Marie Runyon Court. We have another plaque on the other side. There are some things left out intentionally.
An all-round troublemaker.
Some people have asked me, why are we doing this? Why are we naming this building
I'm all ears.
For Marie? Some of us also think it's kind of perversely ironic and humorous to do this.
I mean, Columbia got 2 columns in the New York Times with this, and all of a sudden they could look like they were benevolent.
This was a story that the media would always report on. Reporters would come up to Morningside Heights, and if they had anything to do with university community relations, they would always, in my mind, dredge up the same old stories. The gym in Morningside Park, the Marie Runyon 130 Morningside Drive stories, and other stories that were so old that they had nothing to do with what the university was doing at the time. They became a kind of mythology. So I thought it was a good thing to admit that when you're wrong, admit you're wrong and move on. It can't do any harm. And as a side benefit of that, you would also manage to maybe end this endless reporting of this, what appeared to others to be this, ongoing 40-year conflict. The conflict's over. Why don't we just put an end to it and name the building after her?
I think they threw in the towel, and I guess they thought, what better way to look good than to name the building after Marie Runyon. And I don't think that makes Columbia good people. I don't think it makes them into good actors. I think they've been bad actors for a long time in that neighborhood. A lot of people have been pushed out because of Columbia University. I mean, there's no question that if it weren't for Marie, the tenants would have been out of there many years before. But she just was determined and fought for 40 years to stop them from demolishing the building. And long after the university gave up the idea of using that site for a pharmacy school, they were still trying to evict people.
Yeah, we've got a place here that that is great to have, and we've got it because Martin Luther King taught me, keep on keeping on. Don't ever give up. And that is certainly true what has happened with this building. It has quite a history. You've got to keep on keeping on.
I sometimes tell the people who are in the struggle against the Columbia expansion plan about this incredible woman named Marie Runyon and try to inspire them based on her struggle and her role and the fact that she did succeed. So she was a David versus the Goliath Columbia.
I think Marie's was a very specific victory that that she should be so proud of and that the community can be proud of, because unfortunately I think we don't have as many victories against Columbia that are as concrete as Marie's.
I have an approach, and I think that Marie Runyon has as well. Every tiny little victory is celebrated. You have a party, wonderful, wonderful food. You dance. You dance, women dance with women, men dance with men, women and men dance. You just break down all the barriers and you celebrate your victory. And you know what? It gives you energy to take on the next struggle.
I was there when Marie opened her FBI file, which was huge. It was really thick, but so much of it was redacted. There were black marks everywhere that you couldn't make much out of it, and so much of it was completely innocuous, like minutes of meetings of neighborhood associations and tenant associations. I mean, it's like so bizarre.
Well, here's the package, 400 pages. And by the way, I'm still trying to get the other 200 they said they had at the time. But this is what it looked like. Well, here is the page 1 of my FBI file, and then others are a little different. Many of them have almost nothing but blacked out names, and then you have some that just don't have anything at all as far as people are concerned. Here's another one. How you like that? I think there's one that might be moi, but I can't read it, so see that, right? Look, you don't have to go very far. There's another one. And some of these agents I learned from this in various ways. Had been here to this apartment trying to find an apartment, allegedly, and others at my office at Harlem Restoration Project. And then there was my superintendent, who was, my God, look at this, here are two, and two in a row, actually 3 in a row that are totally blacked out. So who knows what was going on then.
When it gets very heavy from 4 directions and the horns start blaring, I know when it's time for me to go out and direct traffic. Nobody paying any attention to the lights, so I tell them, you know, stop, go, and all that stuff. And in due course, a police car came up. A guy got out. No, he didn't get out. He just talked at me from his window and said, "Lady, would you please get out of the street?" And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I'm busy directing traffic." And he said, "You're going to get hurt." And I said, "I'm not going to get hurt. I've done, not first time out. I know how to do this. I'm careful." He said, "Lady, get out of the street." And I said, "Officer, you have said your thing. I am not going to move." So finally he left. And traffic was really heavy. And I mean, before the 4th of July and some problem at the George Washington Bridge. Anyway, so in about 20 minutes, another car came along. And this officer got out. And he came and said, "Lady, would you move, please?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Oh, I'd like to go over and pet that dog, but I guess I can't right now. I'd love to do that, but I guess I won't." Anyway, he said, "Come on, just get out." I said, "No, I'm staying right here. You do your job and I'll do mine," or something like that. And he said, "What kind of medication are you taking?" And I said, "The only medication I'm taking, officer, are homeopathic remedies." And he looked pretty blank at that, as I expected that he would. And he said, "Well, come on, you just gotta get out of the ministry." I said, "Officer, I've done it before. I'm not worried. I'm gonna finish my job here."
So what is it like when you direct traffic? What kind of gestures do you
Wait just a minute. Wait just a minute. Then he said, "Well, maybe we should call an ambulance." I said, "Okay, officer, you go ahead and do whatever you think. I am not going anyplace." And finally he gave up. "So what do I do?" I said, "Stop."
And do you get compliance?
Oh yeah, perfect compliance.
In the middle of the night, I woke up and a thought just rushed into my mind. I will start a group called Grandmothers Against the War. So I reached out to other grandmothers and other groups, and eventually we put together an action at the Times Square Recruiting Center on October 17, 2005. 18 grandmothers, including me and Marie, the oldest, she was then 90, went to the recruiting center and tried to enlist. And Marie kept banging on the door and saying, "Open up, you know, in Marie's typical aggressive way. But they wouldn't open the door. So spontaneously, we all sat down. The police showed up and they asked us to get up and leave, and we didn't. And they asked us again, and we still didn't get up, and then they asked us a third time, said, "If you don't get up this time, you're going to be arrested." Well, we didn't get up. They arrested us, put handcuffs behind our backs, probably not Marie since she has 2 canes, and put us in paddy wagons and took us off to jail and put us in jail.
She was one of the 18 grannies who got arrested regarding the issue of the war in Iraq, and I was fortunate to be one of the 2 lawyers to represent her and the other 17 grannies.
In the courtroom, she answered the question so directly, but she always had like a spin to her responses. They said to her, why did you sit down with the others? Because the younger people all sat down, but Marie also sat down. So they said, well, why did you sit down? And she said, well, honey, I was tired. Well, it brought down the house.
It wasn't an accident that every story featured quotes from Marie Runyon, because her quotes were the pithiest. They were the sharpest. They were the messiest. You know, she would not mind using profanity. You know, she would call them a bunch of bastards, and she would just explode. And with that beautiful white curls and with that marvelous Southern accent, she captivated the media. And well, they might have been captivated because she said it like it was. And I was always impressed with her comments. I would take the thing out of the paper and I would blow it up and I would send it to Mumia, the guys on death row. It gave them a charge to see this woman, you know, bringing the banner of justice for whatever struggle she was in.
Marie Runyon is someone who cares very much about social justice, human and civil rights, and she's led a life that's consistent with her beliefs. And what I mean by that is it's one thing and important to have ideology and to have beliefs about social justice and human rights, but then to actually carry out those abstract ideas and concepts into day-to-day action. And Marie Runyon does that and has been doing that for years. Do you feel that, you know, the racism has gotten a little better since your time, or that, you know, and do you think that it'll cease, or do you think it will continue to be?
It's going to be forever going away totally, and it's better since the 60s and the freedom rides and all of that. By the way, it broke my heart that I could not go to the bridge where Dr. King walked across. What's the bridge?
Selma.
I didn't have the $69 to pay the round trip for a plane down there. I wanted to go so. But to get back to your question, I don't know that it'll ever leave this country. It is better, but Bush is one of the most racist people I know anything about. Where are my Bush buttons? Oh, God. But I got one or two. There's my Bush buttons.
Oh, no, Marie, I thought you'd be more opinionated.
I'm sorry?
I thought you'd be more opinionated. Opinionated.
What's the adjective she's using?
Opinionated.
Opinionated. Texas village idiot missing.
Well, I sometimes wonder what keeps me going and really enjoying going. That's a part of what keeps me going. But I also have, you know, I think I know a lot about a few things. One of them is how people, human beings, should treat each other. If I am ever in position to influence people who are using very bad tactics with some other human beings, I'm glad to open my mouth. I'm not embarrassed to complain, for example. I try to complain about things that I think are important, like rotten landlords. I don't know, maybe I pay too much attention to what's going on.
I think that she's going to be active till our very last day.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Marie.
can ever say. Thank you for this birthday. Oh, everybody sing. Big car, fill fruit jar, and be gay-o. Son of a gun, we'll have big fun on the bayou. Well, a goodbye, Joe, me gotta go, me oh my oh. This is the cup that I don't allow anybody else to use because I don't want to get broken because I don't think they make them anymore. And it says, in some language that you can probably understand, illegitimate non carborundum. And loosely translated, that means, don't let the bastards get you down. And don't nobody break my cup. Everybody sing. Big car, fill fruit jar, and be gay-o. Son of a gun, we'll have big fun on the bayou. Well, a goodbye, Joe, me gotta go, me oh my oh. Me gotta go pull the Piero down the bayou. Swap my Mun to buy my John, what oh me oh. Son of a gun, we'll have big fun on the bayou.
Jumbo line of fish jumbo. 'Cause tonight
I gotta see my Michelle Romeo. Pick guitar, fill fruit jar, and be gay-o. Son of a gun, we'll have big fun on the bayou.
All right, Marie.